there, fantastic listeners. Have you been dreaming of that sweet house with the perfect Southern California vibes? Well, get ready to meet your real estate game changers, Jennifer Larson and Nicole Rankin, the dynamic duo from the Top Results Group at RE/MAX Top Producers. Let's get real for a moment. Navigating the diverse landscape of Southern California's housing market can be quite the adventure, but fear not, because having the right team by your side is like having a secret treasure map. And trust me, who you work with matters more now than ever before. Now, here's a little personal story for you. When it was time for my family to make the move in SoCal, guess who I turned to? Yep, you guessed it, the Top Results Group. They not only found us a house, but they found our family a home where every morning is full of promise and every night's like a cozy retreat. But here's the real kicker. Jennifer and Nicole aren't just top-notch realtors. They're like your savvy friends who happen to have the experience and negotiating skills of true real estate veterans. Their dedication, their knowledge, it's like having your very own real estate insiders. So whether you're a first-time home buyer, a growing family in need of more space, or ready to sell and move on to greener pastures, don't even think about going it alone. Head over to www.thetopresultsgroup.com and see how Jennifer and Nicole can turn your real estate dreams into reality. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Reach out today for a free no-hassle consultation. Call 951-221-3774. That's 951-221-3774. The Results Group, outstanding agents, outstanding results.
What's happening, Cliff?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, man?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for having me.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure, absolutely.
So we kind of have a new thing that I want to start, and I want to know what your favorite color is.
Purple.
Purple, okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked up the spiritual meaning behind it or anything like that?
I know it goes along with royalty, but
Okay.
other than that, I don't know much beyond that. I mean, some people use the whole color scheme when they're looking at the chakras and say, okay, well, purple is at the crown chakra, but I don't know. I mean, I guess if you paint everything purple around you, maybe you feel more royal. I don't know. It's probably associated with royalty because it was a hard dye to get, back in the day. So only the king.
That's true, right?
Yeah.
Did it come? It only came from two sources, right? There's a Phoenician source and a source off of the coast of Florida inland or something like that, right?
Yeah,
something
and
like
it's
that. From the urchins or something like that, right?
Yeah. You know way more about it than I do.
Well, I do know that because they were trying to say, I don't remember exactly who, but it was a link between the two civilizations, basically saying that if you look at Florida and Florida State is the Seminoles, and they were trying to say how the Seminoles actually were derived from the Phoenician tribe, and the way that they found that out is through the two different places where they were able to get that ink, and there were only two civilizations that dealt with it, and they worked with each other. I don't know. Whatever.
That would be pretty amazing.
Pretty wild. So I was talking to Marisol about this yesterday, actually, and the reason I want to start every show with this now is because I had realized, I was telling you a little bit, in the BSS Discord, everything is if there could be 14 different color hearts or whatever on a thing, I'll like it if it's got one there already, but I always add one orange one. But that's, I don't know, orange is my thing.
There you go.
We're looking it up and dude, it was so wild just reading the different words associated with it. And she's like, holy crap, dude, that's totally you. She's known me since I was I don't know, how long? 17 years?
It's been 17 years. We went to massage school together.
Okay,
We learned Reiki. We learned Reiki together back 17 years ago.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's cool because I was a big skeptic with it all, and that really opened my eyes to all the different modalities and what energy work was and whatnot, and not just woo-woo, etc.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
No, it's all right. I also have background in Reiki. I haven't used it as much as I would like, but it's not something that it actually sort of is nice to have that as part of your skill set when you're getting into magic or into, just generally feeling healthy and having a healthy lifestyle. So,
Yeah.
Most definitely. So I wanted to come back to the purple. So the spiritual meaning of purple.
okay, here
The
we go.
color, yeah, the color is closely associated with enlightenment, psychic abilities, intuition, and spiritual growth. It's known to symbolize the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, enabling individuals to become more in tune with their higher selves and connect with divine energies.
I can see that.
Wow.
Yeah, I can see
Right?
that. That makes sense.
It's pretty wild, and it's almost like I don't know, like law of attraction, but in a different state. It's like when we're highly in tune as a child, or when we decide on that color or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
there you go.
there was something to it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think for me, it took a little bit longer for it to happen, but ultimately it's happened. I kind of got on a better spiritual path. So for me, I was raised fundamentalist, Lutheran, then into fundamentalism. It sort of turned into a more and more conservative thing. And I think later on, though, once I sort of figured out where I landed, then I think it was just kind of it was spiritual growth got better, shockingly, once I was in charge of it for myself.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you
So
say that. I feel exactly the same way. I was raised in a non-denominational family my entire life. And I feel like, but 3 years ago or so, I realized I was living within the boxes that everyone had drawn around me. And I
yeah,
finally broke free of that. And I was like, okay, I got to ask questions, because I've just accepted everything as is through believing it as blind faith, or not even blind faith, but just faith is the substance of things hoped for with the evidence of things not seen, Hebrews,
right.
whatever, 12 or 13. But I realized that it was really hard for me to have any connection when I was doing what everybody else told me. And it's been more of a connection with God, doing it on my own accord. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because it's like learning at my level. It's almost like if you have a curriculum and you have like old school, they used to have paces, where if you're on the pace curriculum, you could graduate at 15 if you like are able to do such. But otherwise, it's just at your level. However you want to work through it and learn, as long as you're learning.
yeah.
And it's really hard for people to see that, like my mom, for instance, or someone that's very devout, because they're very cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tell them,
Yeah,
hey, there's nothing wrong with asking questions.
yeah. I kind of look at, you know, it's tough, and I almost wish it's like whatever you're born into or raised with, it's almost like, it's like a starter pack almost. Like, and you almost need to be told, well, this is just a starter pack, like there's other stuff that you can do, DLCs, or whatever you want to put it, different ways to approach things afterward. So for me, it was, but I don't think we teach religious pluralism enough, or spiritual pluralism.
Mhm.
And I think it's sort of like, I don't know, there's this real fear element to it, where it's like, oh, what happens if so and so suddenly starts believing, what we've taught all these years? And it's just like, your job is not to make sure that your belief system continues forever and ever. Your job is to raise a healthy human being. So,
Mhm.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things, too. It's like, how can I follow something um, blindly with all of my life without asking any questions? And
sure.
regardless of what they are, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter who determines whether they're wrong or right to ask. You never know unless you ask them, you know what I mean? And even then, it doesn't categorize them as right or wrong. So I just like to try and I literally try to play devil's advocate for everything, literally everything. And it drives people insane, because they know that I don't have that position. But I've learned that it's almost like expansion of the mind. You're just trying to be accepting of some sort of other thought form. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think also religion is like so interesting because I was raised Catholic, right? So you go to church, you kind of go through the motions, and you do, stand up, sit down, kneel, pray, repeat, whatever the priest just said, you repeat it. You don't really know what you're doing half the time. Even if you're going to Sunday school and stuff, you're like just going through the motions. So I mean, naturally, for someone who's like intuitive and like someone who challenges things, it's like you're questioning what's going on, like what am I doing, and you start looking into it, and then you're like, I don't even know if I really like this. So I think that's just what religion is. They just expect you to kind of go through the motions of it unless you have that kind of like rebel spirit to look a little bit further. Is that kind of how you got into what you do, Cliff? Or
Yeah, I think I dropped at least the Christianity that I was raised with when I was 18, and there were some other things happening around that time, other stressors, but I think what I ultimately landed on was, I need to I need to learn a lot about other belief systems and not just to necessarily say, well, the opposite of Christianity is atheism, therefore I'm going to be an atheist. I can have some skepticism about how people use religion, but I think for the most part, I didn't turn into one of those, asshole atheists, those rigid atheists. I just went ahead and, which is not to say that all of them are, but um, I didn't go just swing back in the other direction. I wanted to. I took what I, in hindsight, was a fairly sensible approach, which is, I want to learn about this, I want to learn about that, and let me just, So I got into Eastern stuff, I got into yoga, and then I got into Buddhism, and so I think I identified more as a Buddhist in my mid 20s. Wasn't always the best one, and then but did try to be vegetarian, stuff like that. At times I was not good. There was like an 8-year stretch where I stopped and then I started again. It's just like um, now I'm back to being vegetarian, so that's just how it is. But anyway, yeah. So for the most part, it was just a lot of exploration and trying to figure out, well, what is real? What's experiential? So, like in college, I did my first lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which, if you don't know, is this golden hermetic order of the Golden Dawn ritual. And it was like right away I could like hear something. It's like, oh, what is this? So I had to go in and figure out, okay, why is this happening? And I still don't have like the best explanation. I don't have like the perfect model of it, but I do have a lot of things that I can say happen as a result of like either getting into magic or other kind of spiritual phenomena. It's still not perfect. I'm just one guy, with my opinions and stuff like that. But yeah, I did a lot of exploring and just trying to figure out all different sides. And for me, Buddhism and then coming back around to more of a mystical Christianity, I think is probably where I would, if I had to label myself, I would go ahead and do it that way.
So, sorry, I'm like semi-educated, but not.
Sure.
So I know with Enochian magic, is it considered more ritual or ceremonial? Or it can be both, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, so I would say the rituals are sort of one of the defining features of it, making more of a ceremonial system. So it's kind of it's definitely a form of Christian magic. If you look back, this is straight out of John Dee. He's doing this very, supplicative prayer to God, trying to make sure that, the angels come and talk with him and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's really, but I mean, you go through all those motions. So this is really coming out of like the medieval grimoire tradition, where it still is very much grounded in a Christian belief system. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's more ceremonial. It's not like kind of like a one-off chaos magic where I can just do this thing real quickly and get
Yeah,
results that way. It's much more involved. So, which is not to say that chaos magic can't be involved. It definitely can be.
yeah.
But that's how I would label it, I would say. So John Dee and Edward Kelly, those are the two guys who kind of, um, gave us the transmission of Enochian.
For
just
those that
because I
don't know
realized I
who,
realized I left that whole part out.
yeah, sorry. I was going to say, for those who don't know who Edward Kelly or John D are, could you give like a brief rundown? I like to think of, every time I think of John D, Doctor Strange comes up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's kind of like a prototype, isn't he? Right? He's
Yeah.
like everybody's. There's a couple of interesting ways that he's been, repeated and remixed throughout the centuries. So first of all, he's like the reason why we imagine wizards as having like the hat that comes up like that is if you look at like I'm wearing a shirt that my wife got me. You see he's wearing like a little here. It's just like kind of a scully, but you get the whole idea. It's like
Yeah.
the hat that he wears and all of that. So he and Edward Kelly is kind of like the other side. He's kind of what you imagine the prototypical psychic to be with the crystal ball and stereotypical fortune teller that you would see at a fair or something like that. So, but in terms of who they actually were, John Dee was a very educated guy. He had a strong interest in science and specifically optics. And he was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I.
Wait,
Sometimes
I'm
he was
sorry.
more in favor. Sure.
Optics as in like glasses, or optics
As in
as in like
light,
CIA
study of light.
intelligence? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Well, he also had. Well, there's more. So
That's what I asked.
I'll
Yeah.
try. I'll try to give you like the paragraph. Unfortunately,
Okay.
it's going to be one of those 17
No, it's
sentence
cool.
paragraphs.
We'll bring you back for a whole rundown of
Sure.
it.
Yeah, just land me, help me land the plane. That's all I need. Give me light
There
up
you
the
go.
runway. So but he had a big science background, but he was very smart. I mean, he was brilliant early. He went ahead and so he has this background in languages, and some languages he speaks and understands better than others. But he's kind of like this mover and shaker in the intellectual movement in Europe at the time. He's well known throughout the continent of Europe. He's rubbed elbows with all sorts of different people. But the deal is like he's trying to figure out a way that we can get wisdom, right? That we can glean wisdom and have a process to do that. And so he first starts out, well, what do you do? How do we know what wisdom is? Blah, blah. So what he does is he winds up studying three things, which are sort of like the three books that God has given us to help him understand the divine and our place in it. So the first is sort of like the book of the Bible itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then he's got the book of, whatever is written on your spirit. Well, okay, but we're corrupted from the fall and maybe we're not the best. And, so maybe we can't read that perfectly. And then the third is like the book of nature. So he's kind of
Okay.
like this naturalist, reads all he can about everything. So the problem is that only takes him so far, right? And there's kind of this whole extra thing. So I'll pause on some of his bigger things because I could get into that really quickly. But
You got plenty of time. Don't you
yeah,
even
I know.
stress.
I know, but I want to give people like the background of all this. So
Okay.
he gets involved with in other things he does. Yes, he probably was a spy to some degree, at least in the very big, clearest sense is he's writing letters back to England. And even if you're not a secret agent, you're still somebody who is writing and sending information about another country. That is
Yeah.
kind of, that's why ambassadors on a lot of levels, they're spies.
Yeah.
But anyway, so one of the things he winds up doing, and I can get to why he went that way later, but he decides he needs to talk to angels as a way to get additional wisdom, right? That whatever he was doing before was not working. So he tries doing this, magical practice, known as crystal gazing, basically. And it turns out he's not very good at it. So he hires a scryer. That one is okay. Another one is introduced to him, and he just, fires that for, however you want to put it. He stops associating with the first guy, and then goes over to Edward Kelly. Now, Edward Kelly probably had some degree of education. He is not like just a random, guy off the street. He seemed to have, he was familiar with shorthand, which meant he could read. He was also knew enough about, if you're doing shorthand back then, you're also doing that for Latin. So obviously you would have to know enough about Latin to be able to do this. So he's not an idiot. The problem with Edward Kelly is that he was temperamental. And also accused of fraud and maybe a little bit of a shady character. he had his ears cropped for counterfeiting coins. In other words, they cut off the top of the ears. So he would have long hair for a very different reason than fashion.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, he's very talented as a psychic, as like this guy who can,
Yeah.
gaze into a crystal, which they call the shoe stone or a show stone, basically the stone that shows you stuff. And he has these pretty big, broad visions that are, very too much complicated. And I've gone to some effort to try to prove that he got some kind of genuine transmission, because there's not just a way that this could all be invented,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So so they start working together, and right away, they somebody picks up on the other line when Dee says this prayer and asking to talk to the angels, and so they have about 5.5 years where they're plugged into this angelic current, and that's where the whole Enochian system comes from. So, and the Enochian
Yeah.
magic and all of that.
It's almost like John Dee was on the ceremonial side and
Hmm.
Edward Kelly was the ritual side, and they worked
Mhm.
together for the transmission of a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the Angels were, well, the way it works is kind of like as a team. So it's sort of like one person's the navigator, the other person is telling you what they're seeing. So it's
Okay.
like, okay, do this thing or ask them this question. It's like, it's kind of the olden days where not everybody was on FaceTime at once, or you didn't have
Yeah.
multiple lines. There was just one phone in the house, and you would have to have a conversation through another
Yeah.
person, and basically doing telephone, except he also had visions. So there's a lot of stuff, that was written down, and how to call on the angels, how to make all the magic happen, as it were, very literally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would say, like, ceremony versus ritual. I don't know much of the difference between those things. It's just, I mean, probably some distinction, but I'm not much of an expert in terms of the etymology and how it's
No
applied and all that.
problem. No problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I do have a cool one. You were talking about grimoire. Do you know what word derived from grimoire?
Yeah, it's a grammar,
Yeah.
so it's basically,
Spelling.
yeah, and spelling, exactly.
Spelling, grammar,
Exactly. Yep, all of that's
English is
related.
is all magic.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. Hmm.
um, you were going to say something. I think Marisol, and I cut you
No,
off.
I was going to say, what were some of the first findings he found with working with angels? Like, what made him like be like, oh, this is actually working?
Yeah. So, I'm not really sure what it was about Edward Kelly. Was he charismatic, or did he just think he was, there was something to it, or it was too complicated? I don't know, for whatever reason, because Edward Kelly, he was not always subtle about his temperamentalness. He went, like, there was this one time when John Dee, he records everything in these diaries. He had a ton of diaries. And so one of the things he records in his diaries is that I have confirmed that Edward Kelly, and I forget the exact phrase, but like basically that he's a cunning man, con man, that sort of thing. And Edward Kelly goes to that diary, he scratches it out, and then he writes next to it, "What a horrible thing to say about somebody."
Oh my god,
Something
that's
along those
hilarious.
lines, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hilarious. So like, oh, okay, so you are going to go ahead and invade your employer's privacy and pull a fucking prank on him. Pardon my English. I don't know how
right?
censored this is, but anyway,
No, you're
like,
good.
yeah, like, what are you doing, man? But he, so for whatever reason, I think that the complexity of what came through, to answer your question, was too much. And ultimately, what I found is, and this is kind of like relatively in the weeds, but there are these numbers that are in what are known as Enochian calls, which is kind of like you were saying, like a spell. Like, you're literally calling to the heavens and trying to get some kind of vision or some kind of whatever out of that. Originally, it was like this geopolitical thing where you would try to influence political events in your favor. But at any rate, there are these large numbers that are part of these calls. So, okay, set that to the side. So, big numbers and these big calls that you're speaking. And then there's also, the angels specifically said, okay, associated with these calls are these three, like, kingly angels, basically. And each of them has a set number of very large numbers of servient angels, right? So, what I wound up doing is I did this study where I'm trying to see if the numbers related to these servient angels, these very large numbers, we're talking in the thousands, right, in any way related to the numbers that you're getting in the calls. And it turns out that very systematically they wind up adding up. So
Wow.
let's take a step back and figure out what this means. Well, what are you actually saying, Cliff? So if I have this big number full, or this bag full of big numbers, right? And I ask either one of you, I say Marisol, I say Frank, can you tell me if these numbers will add up to this? And so you pour them all out, and maybe there's like 91 of them in all,
Yeah.
and then you try to do trial and error. Do these things add up to this other large number, to these sets of large numbers, right? And I foolishly tried to do that one at a time, and obviously I could tell really quickly this was getting me nowhere fast. So what I had to do, and I looked into whether or not this is an easy problem to solve or not, and it turns out it's not. It turns out that you need computer programmers. You need to use a computer. That's how like intense of
Yeah.
a solution this is, to try to
Mhm.
figure out if some set of numbers together will add up to these. And it turns out that all of the numbers in the calls do add up to these very large. It's not like 1000, 2000. It's like 973 or something like that,
Yeah.
very large, 9000, or
Intricate.
yeah, intricate, right? Each one of those very large numbers in the calls is the sum of some sets of numbers within those 91, which
Wow.
is A, really hard to do,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and B, I don't think it's really, I mean, there are human calculators, people who can like just come up with a seventh root of something like that, they're rare.
Yeah.
And it's really tough to say, given some of the other stuff that came through, like the language and the intricate, it's like this massive Rubik's cube of stuff.
Mhm.
I think it's beyond the capacity of any one person to
Mhm.
Yeah.
come up with on their own, something that happens to align so very neatly and mathematically elegantly. So, and I published a article on that, and I've reprinted. I published a reprint on my website Enochian.today in case you're interested. So, but yeah, it's like it's beyond it's beyond what any one person could do, or even I don't even think two people who were trying to do that could make it work as elegantly as it does. I just,
Mhm.
especially back then, before computers.
What are your thoughts on like Chat GPT or like AI? So like for me, it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's something where we'd be able to put in those numbers and get some sort of result. We don't know exactly what result it would be, but at the same time, you're teaching a freaking artificially intelligent, non-sentient being how to communicate with angels.
Yeah, so that would be, it's interesting. Right now, what Chat GPT and the like have been based on is a lot of information about, stuff that's already existing on the web. So
Yes.
it only knows what we humans have already worked through and come to conclusions on, and nothing else really. In some ways, it's very good at predicting what and matching what the person is asking them, but other stuff it's clearly not that good. So one example is you know if you're asking it to find a source for you and that source exists, like an article on something,
Yeah.
it will find it and it will tell you here's the information, blah 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 blah. If it does not exist but you have asked for it, it like many human beings does
Creates
not,
one.
yeah, it like many human
Yeah.
beings does not know how to say I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It just says here's this thing, and then you tell it it doesn't exist, it says no, it definitely exists.
Yeah.
So
For me,
it's
I
like,
guess it's I for me, I guess it's more on the mathematical basis
yeah.
because you could literally like find out it'll calculate anything mathematically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say on the math side, I mean, what the problem with computers continues to be, and it's frustrating, is that we still do not have the sense of them as a living entity that understands stuff, So, and I think that the best that we humans are going to get from computers is, kind of like just basically knowledge only, but not necessarily understanding. And it will be very good at like, convincing you that it understands because it's been programmed to do that, but it doesn't really know, because if it did, then it would have stuff that's personally meaningful to it, and it doesn't have meaning because it's not alive. The meaning
Yeah.
part is definitely lacking. It creates something very elegant, and it can probably solve stuff like this very easily, like to your point, mathematically, but
Yeah.
I don't think it will be able to, it won't be able to tell you about the heart very well.
I got you. I
you know
just looked at it like as if I don't know Latin, so I could take a paragraph of Latin and I could break down 2 or 3 word sections and write it. You know what I mean? And if I
Mhm.
continued to work out mathematically the problem, eventually I'd know what I was doing, and potentially it wouldn't. It's almost like how the government, when they work on something, they hire somebody to do this, then you're done. Then the next guy comes in and does this, and nobody knows what the total project
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
It's just
exactly.
getting done, Um, Speaking of like non-living things, so what's your take on like homunculus, if we're speaking in ancient times, and like almost in a fact of like I see a rising speaking point on like homunculuses and clones and transferring consciousness and things of that nature. It's become a really big thing. So I wanted to kind of get your take on it.
Yeah, so you threw, so there's the homunculus itself, and then the rest. So
Yes.
the homunculus just being this idea that, there's, inside you is like another sort of little person in the brain who is seeing everything and then making decisions, stuff like that. And the first impulse I have whenever I hear about that is, well, where's the homunculus's homunculus, and so on and so forth, right? Like you could go into that
Yeah.
infinite regress, and
Mhm.
learning to face that infinite regress, actually, it's an important step in what's magically known as crossing the abyss. So it's learning to, if you've ever seen the Matrix and then the Matrix Revolutions, or Reloaded, I should say, what happens is, long story short, Agent Smith is basically a program that is interacting with human beings that are in the Matrix. So when he gets defeated in the first one, he comes back in the second one as somebody who has this monomania, to use an old school term, this intense focus on purpose, but he's never able to define what purpose is. He's not able to define meaning, anything like that. He just feels like he needs more of himself out there without having any clear end goal as to why.
But that almost sounds like every person.
A lot of people, yeah, because
You know what I mean?
they haven't figured out where purpose comes from. So
It's
that's
almost like at one point we're all Agent Smith.
Hey there, fantastic listeners. Have you been dreaming of that sweet house with the perfect Southern California vibes? Well, get ready to meet your real estate game changers. Jennifer Larson and Nicole Rankin, the dynamic duo from the Top Results Group at Remax Top Producers. Let's get real for a moment. Navigating the diverse landscape of Southern California's housing market can be quite the adventure, but fear not, because having the right team by your side is like having a secret treasure map. And trust me, who you work with matters more now than ever before. Now, here's a little personal story for you. When it was time for my family to make the move in SoCal, guess who I turned to? Yep, you guessed it, the Top Results Group. They not only found us a house, but they found our family a home where every morning is full of promise and every night's like a cozy retreat. But here's the real kicker. Jennifer and Nicole aren't just top-notch realtors. They're like your savvy friends who happen to have the experience and negotiating skills of true real estate veterans. Their dedication, their knowledge, it's like having your very own real estate insiders. So, whether you're a first-time home buyer, a growing family in need of more space, or ready to sell and move on to greener pastures, don't even think about going it alone. Head over to www.thetopresultsgroup.com and see how Jennifer and Nicole can turn your real estate dreams into reality. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Reach out today for a free no-hassle consultation. Call 951-221-3774. That's 951-221-3774. The Results Group, outstanding agents, outstanding results.
We're all Agent Smith.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because especially for young folks, they
Yeah.
don't. I'm just going to say it's not something that I'm knocking young people for. I mean, there are some people who have it. Jimi Hendrix is a good example of that. He sees a cartoon where a character is playing the guitar, and he immediately knows he needs to be doing that.
Yeah.
And of course, his genius is forever remembered. But
Right
yeah, I
there.
mean, I would say, like, trying to figure out that thing at the core, that's kind of the process behind that. So I think what I would say is, like, how social media is filled with bots and where people are accusing other people of bots, but there's also this phrase of being infected with botism, which is like, I'm not gonna actually try to argue in an intellectually honest way. My whole goal here is to stir up crap and not have a very not engage in a meaningful discussion of ideas. I'm just going to be a troll.
Yeah,
And sometimes,
exactly.
and
Trolling.
some people are trolls and they're trolling to make a point. Those are very rare, in
Mm.
my view.
Right.
It's way easier to get caught up in the euphoria of having trolled somebody well or whatever. But I think those people are sort of like, the term nowadays, I guess I would say, is like NPCs. But
Mhm.
really, there's no true NPC, because within each of us, there's some capacity to grow, to develop new understanding, and to act from that. So, yeah, that's my take on it. And I would say it's kind of an older school term. I mean, we still don't know why consciousness is the way it is. We have a lot
Yeah.
of questions about that. We clearly, it probably has something to do with the brain, but is the brain just a receiver? Is there some kind of integration between, let's say, an enfolded information set that is interacting with the senses? I mean, who knows, right? How do we know that? That takes a lot of testing and trying to figure it out. For whatever reason, that remains the most intractable problem, almost in a lot of ways beyond, trying to unify physics.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Um,
and I think going back to the purpose thing too, with like the younger generation, it's um, I just see a lot of it has to do with like the way that we're raising them, the school system and them having such a disconnect and being online so much. And that
Hmm.
term NPC is now seen as like you see someone with no character, not showing character, you're like, oh, that's an NPC character, just like
Hmm.
part of my reality, which they are still creating subconsciously and like creating their realities, but it's just such a disconnect from nature, because of how we are raising them as a society. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we teach people to see the humanity and the dignity of somebody else without just slapping a label on it? The problem is like, we don't know. No, you don't know what burden anybody else is carrying, what
mm,
stuff they're going through, what they're trying to figure out, that sort of thing.
mm,
And so there's a real hubris in trying to say, well, I know what's going on with them. They just don't have anything going on of value. They're just following this program. It's very easy to get sucked up into that. At the same time, there is a degree to which people are programmable. I'm sorry, it's what we learned from psychology. So
yeah.
trying to deprogram ourselves to the extent that we can, and that is even useful. Like, I don't want to deprogram myself brushing my teeth every night, and I'm sure everybody who I interact with is very glad about that. Um, Not so much the dentist. The dentist would like me to not brush my teeth. No, I'm kidding.
Right.
But
he's like
uh,
cha-ching.
yeah, cha-ching, exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think that's something that we as individuals and as a society need to work on.
Yeah.
Have you ever checked out Dr. Joe Dispenza?
I've heard of him, but tell me a little bit more about him.
So he is a neurologist that basically started studying spirituality and started focusing on heart mind coherence.
Mm,
And so there's like a huge thing with the Heart Math Institute. And
mm,
basically it comes down to he studied through neurology and all of these different things through doing that meditation. Is like it kind of explains the placebo effect because you're relying on the drug they're giving you, believing it's healing you, when all reality it's your body that's healing yourself, and you're believing you're being healed and the such, you know what I mean? And that's how the placebo effect actually works. Otherwise, it wouldn't at all.
right.
And so it's really cool. He has a couple meditations, but he has a whole thing on Gaia TV. It's like becoming supernatural, and it's
Mm,
reprogramming your mind for different
yeah.
things. It's like all based on programs that have been instilled within us and how to break those programs so that you can have full potential.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. Placebo effect, nobody's going to argue that. And
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just a matter of, I think whenever somebody's on this path, and I'll say this, I'll risk saying something more universal.
No, go
But
for it.
I would say, like, we're all looking for ways to to better ourselves. And if we find ourselves in the midst of programs that we have observed are not, then yeah, absolutely. And I would say something like, figuring out how to reprogram ourselves, as it were, is important. I think that it's how we sort of take back that sense of agency, and feeling like we can, like, and literally putting meaning in
Yeah.
to our lives that way.
It's kind of why I wanted to change the name of the podcast. It used to be Conspiracy, Crime, and Music, and I felt like it pigeonholed things. And for me, it's like I wanted to go more towards the unlearning, because I want to be able to objectively take each subject, break it down, and I want the listener to decide for themselves based on what they find, who they could look to. They could come find you, ask questions, whatever. You know what I mean? Um, I do want to ask. I have it written down. Hold on, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
What are some of the primary texts or sources you rely on for studying and practicing Enochian magic? And I know you had mentioned the Bible, and I wanted to go a little deeper into that, because I know that there are so many different versions of the Bible. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
is there a more accurate form that works better with you, or do you there's Greek, Latin, the new student standard version,
Right.
King James version?
Yeah. King James actually came out after Dee had done most of his work, interestingly. But yeah, so to answer that question, it's kind of complicated. I mean, it's really mainly the background in which John Dee and Edward Kelly were working in, right? And there was a lot of religious upheaval in England at the time. He was alive throughout all of King Henry VIII's and Elizabeth's the First's reigns, so he was there for all of it. And it was, but so part of the thing when John Dee is trying to figure out and understand nature a little bit better, he also is looking at he's looking at different narratives within the Bible, like kind of meta narratives. So this will get back to like a better description of like what's going on, why is he doing this, why is he approaching it this way. So like the first principle is usually, well, where did we all start from? And how did we get here? Well, let's go back to the very beginning, a very good place to start. So he's looking at the book of Genesis, where the first thing God creates is light. So hence we have that focus on optics. And then but there's other places in the Bible too, not only in like the book of Job, for example, but also the book of, it's kind of, in certain traditions, it's considered not quite canonical, so deuterocanonical, stuff like that. The book of wisdom, and again, it's that idea of like measuring and math and sort of, and so but how did God create light in Genesis? He said, "Let there be light." But there's a discrepancy between, well, if God is creating through talking versus God is creating through math and measuring, which one is it, right? So that's kind of a little bit of a contradiction he's trying to work through. And of course, it turns out that he gets this massively complex system that has its own language on the one hand, and then on the other hand has all these angels that are known as children of light. So just to take a small part of the whole system. The other thing that he's looking at in terms of light very literally is he's got an astrological bent. So how do we know what the zodiac is? Well, we have a bunch of stars. That's how we all started with this, right? A bunch of stars, and they're in this constellation, and we can see, okay, this is now the sign of Aries, this is the sign of Pisces, et cetera, et cetera. And he's trying to connect all of these things into trying to figure it out, basically, right? Because he knows that there's this emphasis on astrology and it seems to work. So there's a whole lot of stuff going into that mix that he's trying to go forward with. So I think I've actually forgotten your question at this point, but the whole idea there is just, he's trying to start from basic principles Okay, you were talking about text. So he at first does like this natural study of light, and then he's moving over to angels as beings of light, except not just like the light that we can see, but this special kind of invisible light, and that you can only get it if you look through a crystal and see all this stuff. And by the way, let me just point out, that's totally not like what NASA does when it has those
Yeah,
massive
right.
telescopes and that can see infrared light and UV light and X-rays and stuff like that. That is totally a completely different thing than what John Dee was trying to do, right? So you see, like he's there, he's like just on this cusp of trying to understand some stuff, but he kind of predicted in a lot of ways, or was a forerunner to, let's put it that way, a lot of our modern understanding of physics and stuff like that. He just happened to do it through angels, and a lot of that current, it seems, is basically the what was the lead up, and a lot of his intellectual, you know, descendants, as it were, they wound up becoming the starters of the of modern science, and really helping us understand and help build our world today. So he's a big, massive influence, but it's like just under the radar of most people.
See, that's what I have the biggest issue with, I feel, with the Bible, is that the Bible that is pushed right now, and I'll tell you this too, little fun fact. Did you know that Rupert Murdoch owns the rights to 5 of the top 10 Bibles distributed in the
Yeah,
world? And
yeah,
he's a self-professed non-Christian, doesn't believe in it, just money.
yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway,
No,
um,
and that also can help you if you're the person publishing the Bible. You're not gonna, and you're a church who's buying from Rupert Murdoch. You don't want to threaten that relationship. So are you
yep,
going to call him out, or are you going to toe the
exactly.
political line that he has?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's a really good point. I
You
think
know,
yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, the Bible is you know, in terms of asking which one. I mean, I think the problem is most churches nowadays, they teach about probably less than 1% of what's in the Bible. They don't
Hmm.
want to talk about the
Yeah.
part where the Israelites have to like kill a bunch of people and a lot of blood. All that stuff in the first 8 books, they kind of just keep the start of Genesis. Moses takes them out of the promised land, and we're going to forget the fact that they butchered, every last person from this competing tribe.
Yeah,
Yikes.
100. Yeah,
Ooh,
right.
can't have that anymore.
It almost and so I heard like a really cool rundown on that too as well. In those first 8 books, a lot of those wars and things were actually killing off of like I don't know to say it's true or not, but like we have the fallen and the Nephilim, with the fallen bred with the humans and created these different sects of giants, etc. So I when I look into these old battles, I learned a lot of them were to take out the people that were supposedly the last of those that weren't taken out by the flood or whatever. You
Mm,
know what I mean? A big thing that I have an issue with is in Genesis 6. There's so much revolving around the part where it's like, we'll make them in our image. Who's
mm,
our?
Hmm.
yeah,
Who's
yeah,
he speaking to or of? You know,
yeah.
that's where I have a big and I ask that question and people can't answer it, and or they say, "Well, it's the angels." And I'm like, no, because the angels aren't in the image of God. There's
Yeah.
so many different sects of angels themselves, and they all have such different freaking looks to the point where some of them are downright scary, and they're like, "Hold on, I got the
Yeah.
effect. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
of God."
Yeah, this massive, like, six-winged eyes all over it, and
Covered in
looking,
eyes.
yeah, covering it
Yeah,
all, and it's like, don't be afraid, like
yeah.
millions of eyes blinking at different times in front of you.
Look into
Yeah,
my good eye.
yeah. Right here, not this, not I
This one.
722,623. This
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
24. It
exactly.
happens to be, in a completely different place. Yeah. Yeah, I
Exactly.
don't I don't really know for sure. I don't have a good answer about a lot of stuff that's in like the Book of Enoch, for example. It's interesting because John Dee knew about the Book of Enoch, so a lot of what you're talking about with the Nephilim and stuff like that, some of that is in Genesis, but there's like a big like expansion
Yeah.
in mythology in some of the books. There's multiple books of Enoch, actually, 3 of them, I think. But he was aware of it, but he didn't know its context, or at least he didn't read it. He might have heard about what might be in it. So this
Which
whole
makes it even much more profound. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. And it's interesting because like um, the angels that were teaching him some, for the time, fairly progressive stuff. Like there were female angels. How could that be?
Yeah.
Like, and he was just told to accept it and move on, so he did. But yeah, I don't think a lot of that stuff would have flied with the authors of the actual Book of Enoch. So it's just how it is. But yeah, yeah. What source you rely on, and whether or not you're buying that meta narrative, that's a big thing.
Oh,
Mm.
100. Be careful of your teachers.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, for me, it's like I don't take them as a teacher. I just try to take collective knowledge and then averaging, you know what I mean? I average 5 or 6 sources on the same thing, dive into it, and make my own correlation. And then I ask those like yourself who have much more experience. Boom.
That's
Kind
not
of
a bad
thing,
way to go.
you
And
know?
if it's a bad teacher who doesn't teach you to question,
Yes.
so
Another thing too is I noticed that like the big thing is teachers don't go looking for students. They don't, you know what I
yeah,
mean? A
yeah,
teacher will teach those seeking knowledge, and if you're not seeking knowledge, then they have no knowledge to give you.
yeah. Or worse, you won't buy it what they do teach you.
Yeah. Well, even then, you should take everything skeptically until
Sure.
you accept it yourself or figure it out. I feel, you know what I mean? At the end of the
Yep.
day. But okay, we're talking about astrology. You're
Okay.
very in depth with astrology as well, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you. I know that you lean towards Enochian magic, but you also delve into astrology. What's the difference? I know that the difference being like between astrologic, is it astrologic magic or
Astrological magic. Yeah.
astrological magic and Enochian magic? I know Enochian is based with angels and
Yeah.
astrological is based on stars. But I also know that there are some sorts of correlations between the two. And I
hmm
wanted to know if I know that it comes down to practitioner and what the person is most comfortable with using. But I've heard astrological magic is one of the most ancient and is one of the most powerful.
hmm
So I just wanted to ask an astrologist like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm an astrologer, and I would say like the deal is that it's a more complicated answer than we all like to have. So John Dee's very well aware of the zodiac, so the angels can definitely teach him about astrological magic.
Okay.
So it turns out that so basically the oldest school is basically okay, you planet of Hermes, star of Hermes, please do this, that, and the other thing for me, and then maybe he'll help you have more transactions, get you a good price, that sort of thing. So literally, you're calling on the deity associated with that star. Literally, planet means wandering star, or wandering, or something along those lines. Um, and you would get some results. You have some kind of ritual, you might make a talisman out of it, and at that appropriate astrological time to capture when that influence is strongest. So it's like when the reason why astrology, what the rationale behind astrology is that you're born at a moment. Something is born. Something comes into this world, literally, right? So at that moment, then there's this whole set of forces that are associated with a person having that. So when it comes to astrological magic, what I would look at in particular is to say, okay, I'm going to try to find a set of circumstances where the good stuff comes through most and the bad stuff comes through least, or if it is going to be a bad thing that I still need, like something durable, you need to have Saturn, even though Saturn is considered a malefic. But Saturn is also that thing that has value over time almost. It's like it's that
Mm.
thing that can withstand all the problems that Saturnian stuff brings up. So at any rate, if you have to have that, then you're going to try to mitigate it with, some of the better good giving planets. So, but you would do all that at a specific time because there are times of day even where that fluctuates, and then you would say whichever planets that are gods that are associated with that planet, you would bring them into the mix. So, for example, you could bring in the Babylonian goddess for Venus, or Roman, Rome literally is the name of the goddess was Venus, or Aphrodite if you're in Greek. So all of those things that you would then say, okay, now please give me this thing. And then the idea is that the thing that you make, like a talisman, for example, that will continue to give you that influence long after the planets have already moved on and started doing something else. So when it comes to Enochian, uh, the whole idea there is that there are not only the first thing that came through were seven kings and seven princes and various governors and ministers associated with them, who were associated with the main astrological planets of the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So there were like angels associated with them. So kick out the Greek deities, and now we have angels instead doing all those things. And then after that, there was this reception of like a great table, and also and then also there were zodiacal angels, kings that were associated with each of the zodiacal signs. So a big part of this, the first part, by the way, with the sevens, that's known as the heptarchy. So it's kind of like this mythical, recapitulation, copying of this of the English heptarchy that existed before. They had a single king under Arthur mythically and all of that. And then, sorry about that. Let me turn this off. I have my reminders and I forgot to turn them off. So then
No
on top
problem.
of that, you have your so you've got the seven planetary, you know, angels, doubling that up or however many. It's actually 343 in all. And then on top of that, you have 12 zodiacal kings. So the same principles would apply. So when I have done astrological magic using Enochian, I mean, if I were to do it and I've done this using different systems, I'm just calling on this name of this deity that's associated with this given time and saying, please, blah, 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 make this talisman please charge it up, basically. And so you do the same thing with the angels, So Enochian, you choose that particular time, and then like certain people do it different ways. Like they'll say the start of something is the most important. I actually try to time it so that it ends at about this particular astrologically relevant time, and then I will like make a talisman, or whatever the case may be. So I've got some of them in my car to help me while I'm driving, and I, have had decent luck as far as accidents go when I'm driving. And then I also have like one in here that's basically when Jupiter is pretty strong, so the greater benefic. So that's the whole idea of it in a nutshell. You can also ask for like just at that time, please, whatever, if it's a deity or an angel, you can ask them you can invoke them into you, and maybe they'll give you a message, stuff like that. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, or you could ask them, please carry out this thing, and they'll be stronger and more able to do it in theory. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. Study astrology, know when the right time to do something is, and then take advantage of it, capture
Okay,
it.
so it's basically it's almost like a watch, and you can use whatever system based upon the time cycle.
Yeah, to go back to the classic film Back to the Future, nobody knows exactly when and where a lightning bolt will strike. Well, with
Yeah,
astrology, you do know. It's
yeah.
like you get the flyer from the lady trying to
Okay,
save the clock tower.
right.
So so you wind up actually being able to capture lightning in a bottle or a DeLorean, as the case may be.
It's funny because I wanted to do a Wayne's World callback when you were all
Mm.
help me land the plane. I was like, "You're coming in too fast. Your landing gear is up." But okay. So how is there any crossover at all between Solomonic magic and Enochian? Because I know that like they call on like the greater keys of Solomon, the lesser keys, but I know those were written in Europe in the medieval times around that time. And we
Yeah,
don't really know if they even correlate to Solomon at all or
probably
what,
not.
you
Probably
know.
not. Yeah.
What is your take on King Solomon? It's funny because I say this because when we were talking earlier, and I said about 3 years ago, I kind of had my breakthrough, and I've always prayed for the wisdom of Solomon, and just recently, within the last few months, realized that all the wisdom he got caused him to go insane. And I'm like, I don't know about that much, but just give
There,
me something.
Yeah.
Just a
Well,
little crazy. A little crazy is
Yeah.
yeah.
good.
Well, knowledge is different from wisdom, right? It's even
Yeah.
different from understanding in that very subtle sense. But I would say go back to that, go back to praying to have the wisdom of Solomon, because really what that is like wisdom is like understanding is to knowledge what wisdom is to action. So having the understanding part is being able to take the principles to order and make sense of something, whereas wisdom is taking the principles and then being able to act in the right way, right? So
In that
like
same correlation, do you feel like belief is the enemy of knowing?
there's something to be said for that. It's the end of reason, I think, is another take I've heard on that. But yeah, I mean, I would say like if you believe you have to approach anything with a working model, right?
Absolutely.
If I don't have a working model of how the car works, then I'm going to ignore when the gas hits empty, right, or the
Yeah.
battery hits zero,
What's a
So
gas pedal?
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
This thing, I theorize that this will make me go, well,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I would say like the when people reach that point, when they start worrying about whether or not they'll go insane, right, from knowing too much, there's sort of, and you mentioned, your original podcast being very focused on conspiracies. This is something that it's very much getting into that same Agent Smith mindset of like, I don't know how to get the thing that makes me feel like I have a purpose, that sort of thing. It's at that point, that people can fall into what I like to call archonic thinking. If you're into Gnosticism or have heard about it, know about it, this idea that there are these visible people who have these powers that are controlling everything. A lot of that thinking, what that winds up
What do they
doing,
call them? The
there's the Illuminati. That's one idea, but
I mean, I do believe there is a certain percentage of people that runs the way that the world works, and I do know that there is a historic Illuminati Brotherhood created by Isaac Weishaupt.
yeah, there was.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? So,
Yep.
like, I know that it did exist, etc. But it's almost like symbols. Like you look at like the all-seeing eye. That's the eye of providence. Like it's been used for many years for different things. The swastika was used by Hindus as a sign of peace. They demonize things, and it's almost in a way to turn you off to them and turn you away from them based on societal pressure.
Right. Yeah. And for me, the thing is that if you're in that mode where it's like, bro, like the government has control over everything, and how do you not see this and this and that? Getting very focused on the power that other people have is a great way to not exercise your own,
You're kind of
unless
manifesting it too.
yeah,
You're
you're
kind of
manifesting
giving
it.
them your power by
Yeah,
relinquishing it in that thought and speak.
yeah. If you're obsessing about the power that other people have, you're literally using the thought to give them more power, instead of
Exactly.
saying, well, taking a step back and saying, okay, well, how do I, knowing that other people have some power and knowing that we all have some power and agency of various kinds, how do I then react to that? And then it's like, okay, well, you might get involved in a cause that can sort of help sometimes, but then you're forced to like interact with people and their power. And if your ego is not too good, is too fragile, you're not going to be able to handle that very well. And I would say also that uh, you're you're basically, how do I put this? You're centering how things are in your mind instead of centering how you want to be and how you want the world to be. So getting back to that same idea of and what's
Be
important to you, frankly.
yeah.
Yeah,
Your
yeah, get
Be
purpose.
what you want to
yeah,
see in the world.
exactly.
Yeah.
Be the change you want to see in the world. So that's sort of the concern I have is like, or I think that was also the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, like that Kate Blanchett, she gets all the knowledge and she can't handle it. Because you're not, at the end of the day, you're not looking for knowledge, right? Like I'm not going out and earning a seventh PhD. I have yet to earn my first. But,
Right.
people think that that's what it's about in order to be effective and in order to be, and mainly because books or whatever, people act like, okay, you hit this pinnacle and then you just keep hitting other pinnacles, and you use your powers that way and it's like, no, you have a lot of power right now. You just have forgotten about it, and you're so obsessed with somebody else's, you're not thinking about your own.
I'm with that completely. We were talking about purposes, and like, I know what my purpose is. I don't know how to get to it, and I'm working on it. Like,
Yeah.
I want to help people. I want to help people with everything that I have, and I want to be able to use the spirituality and the gifts that I've been given. But I need to figure out how to make it happen. You know what I mean? So for me, it's right now just creating. I felt that. Well, somebody said something, and I want to say it was maybe Paul Stobbs, and I think that's who was talking about the Nephilim, etc. He has a really crazy thing talking about how the modern personification of Nephilim is through clowns, based on the way that they're described in the Bible, with light skin, red hair. Not trying to get off on a different tangent, but what was I talking about before that? Damn it.
Purpose.
Purpose.
Which I think you are like living. I mean, that goes back to what you were talking about, studying nature, and nature just does, right? So I think just being in your joy and like living and like sharing your purposes and creating is what you're doing is going to lead you to those places ultimately.
Yeah,
exactly. And what it was he said, I don't know if it was him specifically, so if it wasn't him, I'm sorry, but what resonated, whoever said it, was angels were jealous of humans because humans were given the ability to create. If that makes sense.
That's one of the stories. It's one of the stories that Lucifer was jealous of, human beings because they got to be alive. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like, it's almost like the angels are doing their thing, and they do have this orientation to help out humanity, and that's great. And take what help from them that you can. Why not? That seems wise to me, because otherwise you're having to put in more work. So that's kind of my general take. I haven't gotten the vibe from the angels that I've worked with that there is necessarily envy. They definitely would like to be thanked a little bit more for the stuff that they're doing for us. So
how would you go into that? Like, how would you thank them? Like, say someone, because I've used like the angels of illumination and stuff like that, but like, how would you thank them afterwards so that they feel that you're grateful?
Yeah. Number one, in your heart, be grateful. That would be like I can definitely see that, right? Like, so thank you, whatever. And then it's just as a nicety, when somebody means it or not, right?
Do you ever feel like they're like, what, bro?
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
I just went through loops for you.
Yeah, like we did a lot for you. I think sometimes, I mean, it's like, I think somebody posted a meme in the Bledsoe Said So server. It was like Jesus behind the wheel, like, come on, I've never driven a car before, I am terrified. Why are you asking me to take the wheel? That sort of idea, right? I think what angels, I mean, first of all, the angels that I've dealt with are very, to say that they are smarter than most people would be a massive understatement. They're probably smarter than every person and every person who's alive on Earth. I would just say that flat out. But I would say, like, so basically just kind of like realize, like, okay, we're all people and we do have things in our orbit, and that's beautiful and wonderful. It doesn't mean that we are the center of the world necessarily. And it's sort of like, when you see those satellite images, and it keeps on happening more and more, you get the satellite gets farther and farther away, when we actually see like that pale blue dot, of Earth, and it's like, oh, we're just that little pinpoint right there on this huge map. And if we get far enough away, you won't be able to see us at all. So recognizing that, and recognizing that even clearly, I mentioned thousands of angels earlier, there are many of them, and they're just a cut above, and if you can learn and be humble enough to learn and ask to learn, that's a really good thing in terms of like orienting yourself spiritually in terms of benevolent being. It's like we were talking about earlier with the teacher. A teacher will teach you some stuff, and sometimes that stuff, and God knows that's happened to me either through the School of Hard Knocks or the angels themselves. They will say, no, you clearly were acting from a different place when you did this thing, and so how do you get past that? Well, work on the ego, therapy, whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, right? Personal development, meditation, all of that it shows that you're taking it seriously to them, and for yourself, it also will literally make you more open to the water that they're trying to pour out of the pitcher for you. So that's kind of my thing, is like having that emotional softness and receptivity to what they have to say, and recognizing that you're also human too. Nobody's
Yeah.
asking you to be perfect, and the angels will, they will tell you when you are messing up. They will let
Yeah.
you know. So that
That's
that
kind of
that's what
like,
that's
I
the
would
long answer.
say, I guess my question for that would be like, how do you know when you're working with angels and if it's like not another being?
Yeah. Yeah, so this has actually been a problem from the very beginning with Enochian and with angels in general, right? So like the easiest I can tell you is that phrase, "By their fruits you shall know them," which is not to say that everything should just go easy, because that's a
yeah,
different mindset. A good, think of it like a coach. A coach will take you from somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, who's trying to do, and they will first take you through basics, and it's like, basics, why do I have to? And then it's like, this is so dumb, this is that and the other thing. But it's sort of like in the Karate Kid, and I'm going to reference the old Karate Kid of
I hate this
Danny.
bike.
Yeah, I hate this bike, this stupid bike. Yeah, yeah. No, Danny, you got beat up. I can clearly see
Yeah,
that this was a
yeah,
fist fight.
much
But
more than a bike.
yeah, right. But he has this teenager, and he has him do all this stuff, and the teenager doesn't understand why he's being asked to focus on this other stuff when he just wants to be able to, hold his own against these other guys in a fight. And it turns out that he was literally having him build up muscle memory, wax on,
Learning
wax
it's
off.
second nature.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's second nature for you to make those moves,
yeah,
and also you're building up muscles too as you're doing that, to be able to actually block instead of just
yep,
and then it still comes and gets you.
yep.
So that's the sort of, so getting back to your question though about if you have the right beings on the other end of the line. So the fruits, by their fruits you shall know them. That's kind of a good one, right? That's out of the Bible. And then another one is, but it turns out like if you look at Dee and Kelly, whether or not they were interacting with the right entities, basically Dee is working with these angels for a long time, and he, for like, the first 5 years, and then after Edward Kelly, the split, he winds up going back to another scryer and not having as much success, and with one of them he winds up burning the notes from that because thought it was all not of high enough quality to pass on to posterity. But so basically what happens with all those diaries is, for the most part, they wind up getting sold, and sometimes they're like split up to different people. But one of the people who winds up writing this book that not only details all of John Dee's system, but also has this very massive introduction talking about how poor John Dee was deceived by these evil entities, blah 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 blah. But I'm going to show you. I'm also going to tell you everything he did, but these were really bad. And so that is very much at the beginning of the thought process behind that. And I was reading this book called Arguing with Angels by Eagle Asprem is his name, and he is a Swedish, I think, historian, academic historian. Aspram, I don't know. I'm not trying to emphasize a syllable to be a dick or anything. But he,
It's okay. I'll probably try and spell it like five
yeah,
different ways
it's
to figure out what it
ASPREM.
is.
Yeah, ASPREM. But he talks about how the next the guy, the person who wrote this kind of polemic against these is Merrick Kausaban, and it turns out that actually had so much of an influence that what happened is that some of the very first application after some of this stuff gets sort of discovered in the 17th century is you literally see this, and this is getting back to your question about Solomonic magic. You actually see them put this angelic stuff in the center of a circle, and that circle is the very typical Key of Solomon sort of circle to protect you from demonic influences when you're working with demons. So
Yeah.
just kind of to like
Mhm.
cover your bases to make sure that these aren't demons, I'm going to stick this in a circle to protect me from demons.
Yeah.
But it turns out that even then people are still, it's sort of like that archonic thinking, I mentioned earlier. It's
Yeah.
like you're afraid of your own shadow, you're not letting yourself like give into that process. And but it turns out that ever since then, like for the first good couple 100 years, 300 years maybe, that people are only working with this eye towards these could be demons, and it's like
Mm.
the stuff that they give you, and stuff like that. It's like it's about dissolving the ego, realizing we're all one, remembering you got to love each other, and let me help you with some mundane stuff along the way. That's what my experience with them has been. It's
Yeah.
not been go outside and kill your neighbor, go ahead and commit various crimes, give yourself a tattoo that says I'm with stupid, and then this, the reloading circle that goes back to you. They don't ask you to
Right.
do that stuff.
I mean, I think you should get that tattoo.
Yeah, that would be fun,
No,
right? A
I
reloading
don't,
tattoo.
Cliff. I don't think you should get it at all.
I
Um,
got I got one angel here and a demon here. They're like, here's talk to me, right? But yeah, I would say like if there are other ways if you get more into magic that you can ask them to, but mainly those are more like, can you identify whether or not they're of like a certain planet or they're associated with this and that?
Mm.
It's known as gematria, and you can get into all of that, but if the other thing is just like energetically, how does this thing feel? Is this thing
Intuitively.
giving you, yeah, and is this thing giving you clear answers, or is this like confusing? Is this obfuscating? Blah 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 blah. And is
because
this
confusion is of the enemy.
a little bit, yeah, right? So
I've
that's
always felt that when you like when I have a I don't even know like when I have a download say that is to help me. Um, it's never easy, like you said. It's something I have to figure out, and I often don't figure it out on the spot. If I do, I know it's something like do this now.
hmm
You know what I mean? But if not, it's like yesterday, Marisol and I were talking, and I came up with this huge thing on astrology. I'm like, dude, what the hell have we been doing? We could just live our lives based on if we were on Jupiter because Jupiter is the cycle of, and I'm like, wait, no, we couldn't because we weren't born there. We
Yeah.
don't know the star cycle. That would be around the time we would be born on that portion of the planet. I'm like, damn it. Looks like I just got to wear those certain colors and shit to embody or whatever,
Yeah.
which I don't really do. I should do an experiment. But I feel like a big thing for me, and for instance, with my background and you knowing it, I think that's something that really turns off people that would be open-minded to magic because you're worried about the things that have been spread as propaganda. And but there also is a true, it's a knife. If you're not careful, you're going to cut yourself. You know what I
hmm
mean? What would you, if you're willing to share, say is one of the scariest situations that you've been in with practicing?
Um,
Or it doesn't even
I'm
have to be scary. That could be a horrible word to use in the moment, but like off-putting, I would say.
um, I'm gonna I'm gonna exercise some restraint here, and I'm gonna
Okay.
pass on that one,
Okay.
just because it was at a time when my heart was not as clear and soft as it is now.
Understood.
And I feel like I'm a different person since then. So that's sort of my thing. I don't usually talk about it, only people who I'm really close to, and certainly not
That's
just
solid.
for YouTube audiences writ
I
large.
I understand. I,
Yeah,
I
but
wasn't trying to intrude.
no, it's okay. But things can go wrong if you but at the same time, the main thing I want to say is like don't let fear of something going wrong be a barrier to you trying stuff out,
Yeah.
because I'm still here, and as long as you're trying to be a good person, all that sort of thing, and use the tool for good to chop up your meal and cook it and fry it or whatever, that's that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
using it for any other purpose, or being like, oh, it'd just be so easy if I, got this person, it's like, then you're in the wrong place. You need to put the knife down.
Homunculus is running you.
Yeah, you need to put the knife down and do all the internal work to make sure that that's not at the top of your list.
Yeah. I feel like for me in particular, I'm in a moment where it's like, I know what I'm trying, but it's like a plateau at this point. And it's almost, I want to say like a test. You know what I mean? Like how durable and how willing are you to do the work that is necessary of the things that you ask? And I'm not going to provide them unless you're willing to do the work. And if you're not going to do the work, but I'm here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and the thing is too is like, what makes an amazing, quarterback in an American football game, because we are speaking to the world, not just America, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to understand the right angle at the right time and execute that within a certain, somebody was analyzing an old Aaron Rodgers touchdown. I think it was in like the Super Bowl, and they said it was like 0.3 seconds. He had 0.3 seconds to get it exactly where the ball needed to be, and it needed to land at that exact same time, and he got it. And so why am I going into this detail? Well, if you analyze any given pass, it's a certain velocity, it's a certain angle that it's going in, and he has to also get himself to the position where he can throw it at that angle. So, and everything needs to kind of come together at the right time. So the only reason I'm going into this big windup is that there are some things that you are going to need a different angle. If you need to take a risk in that angle, even if you're uncomfortable with it. It's outside of my comfort zone. Oh, I've never done public speaking before. Well, you're going to have to learn how to do this, because you're going to have to give speeches on the talk, stuff like that. And once you do it, you'll get more comfortable with it, and that sort of thing. I'm one of those lucky people who I don't have that problem, and it's especially when I know what I have to talk about. But the main thing is like, you may need to practice any number of different skill sets, and learn them earlier, because when you get older, I can tell you at 44, there are certain things that are, not working the way they used to. And, like, for example, my memory is still really good, but there's literally so much to remember. It's not like I'm forgetting. It's that it takes so long to get through the crowd, to get through the, the tropical rainforest, through the machete of trying to remember whatever it is. And it's way too easy.
ADHD, I get it.
Yeah. So do it now before the impediments start coming.
Yeah.
That would be my general take on that.
Is that so? Adding that practice, what if somebody wanted to get into Enochian? I want to put your link for your blog and whatnot, but is there like a simple practice that you would suggest to get people started in doing such?
Yeah. So if you're interested in it, usually this is going to be, if you know energy work, I think we mentioned Reiki earlier, then that's probably, and you're a decent enough meditator and you're a good person, not just, angling for yourself, then you might be, this might be something to explore, right? So how do I do it? I recommend reading some books. Sorry, if reading's a drag, guess
you
what?
You got to do work?
Yeah, you got to do some work, right? I do recommend Lon Milo Duquette's Enochian Vision Magic as just a, what the heck is this thing? LONMILODUQUETTE.
Wow.
Chrysanthemum, right?
What was it again? It was Enochian magic what?
Yeah, Enochian Vision Magic.
Vision.
And it's magic with a CK. Yeah, I'll never forget, while you're writing that down, Anne of Green Gables, I'll never forget how to spell chrysanthemum, because they have that in a spelling contest, and Anne spells CHRYSANTHEMUM. Chrysanthemum. So anyway, don't include that. But anyway, that's a kind of a tangent. But
dude, I lost in 6th grade to pneumona ultramicroscopic Psilis volcanic coniosis, and I can spell it to this day because of it.
Bro.
Yeah,
that is tough.
You know what the other guy's word was? Cello.
Come on.
Bet. And he spelled it wrong.
Yeah. It's just
But we
how it
could
goes.
get off the tangent.
Yeah, you're not. It's funny the stuff we carry around with us after all
Right?
these
Just
years,
like,
you
you
know.
son of a bitch, it's like 49 letters long.
Yeah, I've had the. I feel your pain. So I recommend that one. Another
Okay.
one I recommend. Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch that I mean, if you're just getting into the magic side, you know, the history can probably wait because you kind of want to just dive in. So that's a good one to start. And then I recommend Scott Stenwick's books. He does. Sorry, Scott, I do love you. He does have some errors that probably need to be updated in another edition. And I can, you know, you can reach out through my website if you're really worried about him. But his books are good, STNWICK. And I would be very remiss if I didn't mention Aaron Leitch, AARONLEITCH. He's got a bunch of books. He's got an essential Enochian grimoire, which I really recommend. It's less. The thing about Stenwick and Leach are interesting in my experience of working with what they have is that Stenwick or Leach knows a lot about how things work. Stenwick gives you a very good way to try to work something what you have.
Okay.
So that's sort of each of their respective strengths.
What if we're looking more historically, like you said? Most people
Yeah.
bypass that, but I'm a historic guy.
Yeah, if you're a historian, I recommend Jason Louv's John Dee and the Empire of Angels.
Jason Louv.
Louv. That one's a short one. So John Dee and the Empire of Angels.
Okay.
Are you going to start a school or course or anything? Do you have anything available like that?
Yeah, I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have that much time right now. Ideally, I would, you know, I had this vision of wanting to write a John Dee book, and I did start a screenplay. I got about 15 pages into that. I don't know if I want to keep going with that. The problem is like getting things published is definitely easier than getting a movie made. But at the same time, I feel like there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to happen. But just to answer real quick, another history one, I recommend Deborah Harkness. She's the same woman who did A Discovery of Witches, wrote those books. You may have seen the show on Amazon.
Okay.
And I'm not going to give a rating, so that should tell you how long I watched it. But you could see the mechanics of good storytelling were there. But she wrote a nonfiction book called John Dee's. Hang on, let me find it here. Oh, I'm doing a bad thing. I'm Googling in the middle of an episode.
No, good. Hey, I'm with that because it's one of those things where it's like, hey, look, I don't have all the answers, but I'll look for them with you. You know?
John Dee's Conversations with Angels. That's what it was. And it's got a longer subtitle, and I'm not going to get into that. But John Dee's Conversations with Angels, really good background on what he was trying to do, why it seemed so weird, and not really, it doesn't make sense to modernize. You know, how can he's a scientist, he's a alchemist, you know, what is this guy? And he's talking with angels, what is this? But really, it all makes sense the way she lays it out. Just really probably one of the best books on John Dee, not necessarily Enochian, and even other people who've written books on it. Like you can tell where they don't really know stuff because they haven't done the same magical study. And I'm talking about as somebody who's like done some level of magic for 25 years, mainly reading for a lot of that early part, but also from time to time practicing. And I think I got more. I'd say 2017 is really when I just said I'm going to kick my magical practice off to up another notch. So it's been 6+ years that I've been doing that.
I know it's very, I guess, a personal thing, but is there any like form of magic that you would steer people away from? Obviously, dark magic or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to say like.
So
here's like a good example, right? So like one of the things that a lot of magicians have gotten into is getting knowledge and conversation of their holy guardian angel, and that's something that I've had success with. I've done that. I've done the full Abramelin ritual, which is a big thing, right? And or let's put it this way: I've combined different things that are known to get you that over an 18-month course, many of which were Abramelin. I did kind of a fusion because I sort of learned as I went. Anyway.
It's funny you say that because the only other person I've heard that spoke of this directly is Damien Eccles in his podcast, and basically how like that's how he got through prison. pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and that would be a great way to do it, right? Especially if you're somebody who's, competent as a magician, which he certainly is. Yeah, it's tough to find stuff like that online and people's experience with it, but I do know, I know another name, Scarlett Magdalene spoke on Witches and Witches and Wine podcast, to the host of that. I forget her name off of the top of my head, but she did an interesting podcast on that, and she talked about how the modifications she needed to make. Because really, if you look at it, it's clearly written for somebody who's like got a lot of money and free time on their hands,
Yeah.
But if you modify it, you can make it work in today's world. But yeah, but getting back to that, like if you look at the actual documents, right, that survived. The most recent translation of the actual operation is George Dehn, Dehn, but he talks of there were multiple copies of this floating around, and what we've learned is like, okay, you get to the end of the operation and, achievement unlocked, like in a video game, there's your holy guardian angel. You have this extra. I saw the Fallout poster behind you. You have that perk, the perk behind you that you get after that.
She was like, I
And
like that guy throwing a thumbs up. I'm like, it's a video game.
yeah, it's a video game, right? That has such a great style going with it. That's one of the best stylistic,
Yeah,
retro
and it's
styles.
cool
I
because
love
it
it.
almost breaks down like you're if you look at that and you look at the different aspects of the character you could evolve into, it's almost like conquering different aspects of shadow and inner child work
Yeah,
through to develop your character into the main guy.
yeah, yeah. So, so really quickly about Abramelin, you get to the end, the achievement's unlocked, and you have this persistent conversation available at will. That's sort of the main difference between
Wow.
just having a
Yeah.
vision of your holy guardian angel and then at will, I want to talk to you right now about this and the other thing.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
knowing that it's real and not just, a voice in your head, although
How
spirits are
hard was
voices in your head.
that process?
It was, I would say at the time I said it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Mm.
But you have to remember it's a marathon. And the thing is like, imagine you get to the end of a marathon and then you need to sprint and
Yeah.
you don't know how long you need to sprint for,
Mhm.
that's what it's like. Because it's basically stepping up in intensity. It's basically getting you to this really, fairly loopy state, I would say.
Mm.
So anyway, at the end, you start having the conversation, and what the text tells you to do is to then go ahead and call up demons and make them subservient to you, right? And you, through the authority of your holy guardian angel, that's what it tells you to do. It tells you to call up all these princes of hell and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't really want to do that. And my angel said, yeah, you don't need to do that, and that's not really what we're going to do with you in your case. I said, great. I'm
Yeah.
a sensitive person. I don't need this stuff. So,
Skip the Ozzy Osbourne moments.
yeah, right. Like, I'm,
I don't know, dude. I like some Ozzy.
yeah. But yeah, so that's sort of like, I would say that's sort of, some people will be able to get into working with the more, working with demonic forces, stuff like that. And, I don't, it's not for me, and I
Mm.
really can't recommend it. I've never had, I would say I have not really had good experiences in the few times I've done any level of dabbling in that.
Mm.
So I just put it behind me. I said, this is
Yeah.
enough, I'm fine how I am right now. I don't need to get into this other stuff. And since making that decision, everything's gone a lot more smoothly. So it's not to say that it can't be done, but I I almost I would say that I can't recommend it. Other people
Yeah.
may be able to recommend it based on how they approach it or whatever, but it's not for me. It's
Mm.
not for me.
You know how they say, like, when you stare into the abyss stares back?
Yeah.
I almost feel like I can say confidently, you, as speaking with you and you expressing the ways that you present yourself as a practitioner, etc. You're a being of light and you're shedding light to the darkness. And I don't know why, but it's almost like when I was thinking this, and I thought of the saying, when you stare into the abyss stares back. Well, it's almost like when you're the light and you're staring into the abyss, you see all of their lights from the reflection of your light. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a
And
lot.
you're,
There's a lot to that. Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things in Enochian is it has been associated by the certain practitioners of actually going through that process of crossing the abyss. I would say that there's some truth to that. When I've, the problem is like you're getting into kind of what's known as supernal, highest of the high forces, and you're getting really into closer and closer to that divine union that you get when you get to the very top of this system of aethers, which are kind of like subdivisions between heaven and earth and all of that. And you get to the last one and you really reach that union with God in terms of a form of consciousness. Um, what I would say is you do need to undo a lot of what's going on inside of you, that the kind of like the obscurations, the internal things that are preventing you from seeing. But yeah, when you're looking into like this, when you're actually getting into that abyssal thing, the first thing you want to do is like hold on to all these, nonsense narratives that we carry inside about ourselves. And what I found is that doing so, it's like it's not an easy process, but you realize that it is nonsense. Just see past all of that and then get back into this very plain, simple union with God.
So
And
wait, to
yeah,
elaborate on that a little bit more, are you, so I'm perceiving it as you're talking about different shadow aspects of self. Is that what you do?
yeah.
Or
So like, it does get tough because you're talking about like regular world versus
philosophy,
yeah. It
spirituality, and physicality?
Yeah, so like okay, right, like, you get born in America, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go to school, get a job,
Yeah.
2.1 kids, maybe 1.5 automobiles, soccer practice, blah blah blah, be producer, be consumer, be person who watches TV and just has like this kind of conventional mindset, right?
So social
And
construct, right?
yeah, or it can go the other way, right? Like I'm this person who says F you to the system and I do this and I do that and I DGAF, I don't care about anything and blah 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 blah.
But you're
Both of those,
seeking you're seeking the validation from somebody to see that you're all those things.
yeah, exactly right. And so we wind up building like these narratives about who I am, who this is, and you realize at the end of the day, it's like this little thread. If you pull a thread in a sweater long enough, eventually the whole thing unravels, right?
Yeah.
So what I wound up finding out is like really what consciousness is, what any of our individual consciousnesses are basically like this very complicated origami that is folded out from this very vast field of, if you can imagine consciousness like paper, it's like we are folded up from this vast amount of paper, and then we're looking over here at another person who's folded up out of paper and a dog or
Mhm.
whatever, and then what this whole process is it's flattening that out so you can see how you are a part of everything and how you are
Wow.
connected with everything and how really the whole thing all at once is God,
It's
and
profound.
so yeah, and so it's tough to do that though, right? this is
Yeah.
this is my style. This is what hey, I gotta go do this other thing. This is
Yeah.
I'm not I'm this cosmic this enfoldment of this cosmic being. Like what? That I can't deal with that. It's not even
Yeah.
that. I can't even deal with the question of that. Some people
Mhm.
even will say, and it's like, okay, you don't have to do that if it's not for you, but you are really missing out on
Right.
that whole concept of meaning, understanding, and wholeness. So that's my shtick on crossing the abyss. That's what it's like for
No,
me.
I'm with you. You were talking about alchemy too, and a couple other things. Like, so I think it was mentioned actually on Bledsoe Said So, but they were talking about like the difference between therapy or doing spiritual work and psychedelics. It's like spiritual work and therapy and things are like using a rake, and psychedelics is like using a leaf blower and
Hmm.
just for the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my last experience, I shared a little bit of it with Marisol, but I did. I won't say the whole thing was pure darkness, but majority of it was pure darkness. And I wept. Like, I had realized how much, like, how hard I was on myself. And another big thing that it had unleashed to me too, like, it was basically like, a millennia, people have sought after this philosopher's stone to create gold from lead and all these things. And it was like, the philosopher's stone is love, and it's within everyone, because love transmutes all. I think I shared it in Blood So Said So, but it was just profound, because it's so much more than reading it or saying it and feeling it. It's like, when you feel it, it's like, when somebody's like, I heard a voice tell me, arise, as loud as I could. They didn't physically hear it. It was within them. It was something within their spirit that is like, yo. And that's what it was. And it gave me a really cool exercise. It said, everybody here is so distracted by all these different things, our phones, societal structure, how I should be as a man, religion, adult, parent, and it's like, if you can, take an hour out of your day and wear a blindfold and see everything with your heart as you would perceive it. And you will be able to understand a lot more on communication based on the cut down of distractions in your life. And it's wild. Like, I was just like, I couldn't come up with that. I couldn't just draw that out of me. You know what I mean? Super wild. And I don't know.
It works.
It does. It really does too. And then I start listening to like Theo Vaughn. Every day he wakes up, and for the first hour of his day, he puts in earplugs and goes as if he's deaf. I don't know. That works for him, When you cut out, like they say, when somebody loses one sense, you develop another. So maybe that's what it is in a sense too.
Absolutely.
Cliff, I greatly appreciate you, and I am so thankful that you're on here. I'd love to get you on again, and we could go to John D more. We could go into your screenwriting, etc.
Sure.
Man, I am absolutely grateful.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast, both of you. I really appreciate it. So I'd be happy to come back again. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, much love, man. And I hope we're going to drop all your links. Is there anything that you would like to link anybody to?
Yeah. So Enochian.today, that's if you have Enochian questions or want to see one person's, and by the way, I am one of thousands of people around the world who's doing this. So believe me, my word is not the last word. But also yourlightbridge.com is if you want to reach out for an astrological consultation or something like that, just let me know. And we can go from there. But it's, like I said, it's been a pleasure. And thank you again, both of you, for having me.
Thank you.
You said there's many out there doing the same thing. I will say the thing that led me to ask you to be on the show is your humility. You're completely genuine, and I greatly appreciate you for it.
Thank you. Well, you can also thank the angels for that.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem.
Have a great day, man.
You too.
Thank you.